Welcome to Inspire the Next Mind by Fawzooz.ai. Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful story of personal transformation. It's a journey that's all about how we can rebuild our inner world to completely redesign our outer one. This is the story of Fawzooz.
You know, every big change starts somewhere, and for Fawzooz, it began at a breaking point. Just imagine this. You're sitting in a cafe. Everything looks normal on the outside, but inside your head there's a hurricane. That was his reality. It was one of those moments where you realize the way you've been coping just isn't cutting it anymore. I think we've all been there, right? And for him, that feeling was the spark for a massive change.
So here's where the journey really kicks off, and it starts with a kind of paradox. See, on the surface, Fawzooz looked like he had it all together. He was a responsible father, a great employee. From the outside, his life looked totally normal, maybe even successful.
But that's the thing about our inner worlds, isn't it? They don't always match what people see. Deep down, he felt completely trapped in this storm of anger, sadness, and anxiety, and he had no idea why. This feeling, this internal crisis, that something was just profoundly wrong, that was his wake-up call. It was the moment he knew he couldn't keep living on autopilot anymore.
So where do you even start when your inner world feels like total chaos? Well, for Fawzooz, the first step was to turn inward. He started looking for a map, for a set of tools he could use to finally understand his own mind. And what he found were some incredibly powerful psychological frameworks that would literally change everything for him.
The very first tool he discovered was emotional intelligence. And this wasn't just about knowing that he was angry, it was about finally understanding why. He learned to see his emotions not as some enemy he had to fight, but more like a signal, a message trying to tell him something important.
And through that new self-awareness, he had a breakthrough. He realized that his explosive anger in a work meeting, it wasn't really about the criticism he got. It was being fueled by a much deeper, much more painful thought, the fear that I'm not good enough. And that one single belief, man, it was the hidden engine driving so much of his pain.
And that discovery led him right to this question, which is really the heart of his next tool, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. You see, CBT gave him a way to put his own thoughts on trial, so to speak. He learned how to spot these automatic negative thoughts that always feel so true and so powerful in the moment.
And this is a perfect example of how it works. It's called cognitive restructuring. He'd catch a thought like, I'm definitely going to fail, and he'd challenge it. Is that really a fact, or is it just a feeling, a fear? And by looking for actual evidence, he could reframe it into something way more realistic and empowering, like, you know what? Failure is just part of learning. That tiny shift in perspective was absolutely monumental.
But let's be real, some emotions are just too intense to just think your way out of them. And that's where his third tool, dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, came into play. DBT gave him actual, practical skills for dealing with overwhelming feelings right in the heat of the moment, like how to get through a crisis without making it worse, and how to actually communicate what he needed effectively.
So at this point, Fawzooz had this incredible toolkit for his mind. He could manage his thoughts, he could regulate his emotions, but something was still missing. There was this deeper sense of peace that always felt just out of reach. And that feeling is what led him from the psychological to the spiritual.
He discovered this concept of tuwaku, which is about a complete trust in God. And this was a game changer. It wasn't about giving up or being passive. It was about doing absolutely everything in his power, giving it his best shot, and then letting go of the need to control the final outcome. It was like this huge weight was lifted, a total liberation from the crushing pressure of what if.
Now, this spiritual journey wasn't about complex ideas. It was built on really simple, powerful practices. Prayer, for example, it went from being just a daily routine to a moment of genuine connection, a quiet space to recenter himself and tap into a kind of peace that had nothing to do with his external circumstances.
And that trust just got stronger and stronger with every new challenge he faced. The whole way he saw the world started to change. Setbacks weren't just failures anymore. He started seeing them as maybe part of a bigger plan, trusting that even the tough moments held some kind of hidden lesson for him.
He also started a daily practice of gratitude. And I don't mean just saying thanks. He made a conscious effort to shift his focus from what he felt was missing in his life to everything he already had. That simple act started to totally rewire his perspective, helping him see all the good that was already there.
And finally, he found this incredible peace in repentance and asking for forgiveness.
Now, this wasn't about getting stuck in guilt over past mistakes. It was the exact opposite. It was about embracing the freedom of a fresh start, like a spiritual reset button that allowed him to move forward with a much lighter heart.
Okay, so now with this newfound harmony between his mind and his spirit, Fawzooz was finally ready for the last piece of the puzzle, taking all this inner wisdom and applying it to his outer life. It was time to stop just letting life happen and start actually designing it.
And this led him to this really critical idea, the difference between living by design versus living by default. He realized that most of us are kind of living by default, right? We're just following a path laid out by routine or what other people expect of us. He decided no more. He was going to become the architect of his own life and start making conscious choices that were actually in line with his true values. He built his new life around these core pillars. He got crystal clear on what he wanted his future to look like. He worked on a mindset that saw challenges as opportunities, and he made sure to balance all the important parts of his life. But most importantly, he realized his true purpose was to help others. And that's what led him to create the Fawzooz Initiative, to share his own journey to empower other people on theirs.
So you see, Fawzooz's story isn't just about him. It's really a map, it's a blueprint for a universal journey of transformation that I think can resonate with anyone who's ever felt like, hey, something here needs to change.
And this quote from the Fawzooz Manifesto just captures it perfectly. The mission that grew out of his journey is all about using the power of stories just like his, to inspire growth and make learning a deeply personal and, well, a lasting experience.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? If there's one lesson from Fawzooz's journey, it's this. True, lasting inner peace doesn't just come from one place. It's the beautiful harmony of these three essential pillars: mastering our emotions, nurturing our spirit, and intentionally designing our lives. And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. If you stopped living on default and you started making conscious, intentional choices that lined up with your deepest values, what would your life look like? What could you build?